as we move towards December the 14th and 15th, Vince, the Irish question seems to be the thing where there's going to be the biggest stumbling block, rather than money, rather than European nationals' rights. How do you see the situation at the moment?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, it's easy to understand where the Irish have come from. I mean, this is for them, recreating an Irish border would be politically disastrous. But equally, you know, the Irish have got more to lose from a bad Brexit than almost any other country in the European Union, given the way their economy is interwoven with the UK. So actually, I would think the chances of getting beyond this particular deadline are quite high. I think the real problems actually for the Brexit negotiations come next year rather than this particular cliff that we've got to surmount, because it isn't yet clear whether we're going to have something which vaguely approximates to existing membership, a sort of Norwegian type agreement, or whether it's a very distant relationship like Canada. That fundamental question about the nature of the relationship is very much up in the air, and I think the divisions around that will become apparent when we get into the serious negotiations.
So you think next year the focus then? I spoke to two lawmakers on Wednesday of last week, one from the SNP and one from Labour, so different parties to yourself, Vince, and they were both talking about the possibility that any kind of transition deal might linger, that there might be some sort of change of hearts amongst the population in terms of how hard the Brexit should be, and that we end up in a transition deal that ends up dragging out into the future and just becomes the status quo. It ends up being a kind of Norway, I suppose.
Well, that's true. I mean, I'm probably a little bit out on the limb politically, but I've argued that, you know, Brexit might never happen. I mean, I'm not putting the chances of this much above 20–25%, but it could be that it never happens, and there are two ways it could never happen. One is that it's all a terrible mess sometime next year, and large chunks of the government and the Labour Party decide to rethink the whole project of Brexit and try to find a way out through a new vote or something of that kind. But the other, as you say, is that they do negotiate a trade agreement which isn't greatly different from the status quo. There's a long transition, and effectively we haven't really left, except the British have lost control over decision-making in regulatory standards.